revenues and generating investments. So we work with all types of accelerators, and that's why we don't produce any sort of rankings. So if you are interested in partnering with us, you can get in touch with me, or I'll share, I think after the call, we can pass along the information from my colleague, Emily. And I'm happy to answer questions. I know Avery's going to lead us in some questions. And then obviously if participants have more, I'd be happy to continue.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Brent. Actually, we do have an initial question here from Donna of what proportion of the partners, specifically the accelerator programs, are using the information to understand the data to do further analysis? Like, are they taking some of that raw data and doing their own further analysis, or are they taking your analysis for that?
So it's a good question, and it's something that we've really... So the first phase of Galley just ended last month, and phase 2 is going to continue the work that we've been doing in terms of data collection, but have a much stronger focus on working with those accelerator programs on actually applying the data that we're collecting and working with them to utilize the data that they may be collecting outside of the scope of what we're able to provide. So we've initiated a lot of conversations about, what's most important to you as an accelerator, and how can we utilize this data and link it to the things that are important to you. We had a workshop in Washington, D.C. at the end of May with 20 of our accelerator partners, where we kind of went through a very technical exercise of setting regional benchmarks and defining KPIs and other metrics that are important and that could be pulled from the Galley data set. So it's something we're working towards. Obviously, there are partners who are using it, like Village Capital. They're probably the best example. We would like to get beyond our partners just using it for donor reports, but doing more to make programmatic decisions. And so that's a conversation that we're continuing to have. Does that answer the question?
I think so. Building off of that, you mentioned this idea of like using donor reports. So one question we had was, how does this accurate collection of data help to tell the relevant stories to stakeholders across investors, mentors, entrepreneurs?
Well, I think it's complementary to the story side of it, because I think one of the biggest benefits of accelerator programs is being able to tell individual entrepreneur stories. But, you can kind of pick and choose. If you have one high performer, you can sort of milk that, for a long time. Whereas this data just adds more credibility to the overall performance of your accelerator. So I don't know if Heather has kind of another angle to that, but that's kind of what I would say is just adding more credibility, standardization. I think a lot of programs are moving very quickly, and solid evaluation takes a lot of pre-planning that doesn't always get done. Even in most programs don't have the proper sort of planning ahead of time to say, okay, in 1 year or 2 years, this is what will define as impact. So just, I think it lends validity, but also a sense of seriousness that donors can sort of take comfort in.
Yeah, I agree. And both reporting, following a program. So a lot of partners are interested in, the specific program that they might have funded, with what are the performance metrics for the companies that participated in that program. But then also, when you are starting initial conversations with partners and need to demonstrate the effectiveness of your program, third-party validated data that shows the actual growth of companies is very powerful. In addition, Village Capital, this is kind of going to Donna's question around other uses of the data. We also use the data, use different aspects of what Emory collects. So for example, through Emory's efforts, we know the diversity of our alumni pool and our applicant pool, which is something that partners might be interested in, but also something that we use to drive our own decisions. We also are conducting a number of different research studies using the EDP data pool as our primary data source. So things like, we have a very unique investment methodology. We use peer selection where companies themselves actually decide who receive investment from our fund. We're using the EDP data to better understand the effectiveness of that methodology from a financial and an inclusivity perspective. We have done analysis to figure out which sectors might perform better in particular geographies, since we do have such a large global footprint. Those are just some examples of the way that even the data can be sliced and diced and not just used strictly for how is your program performing overall from a financial perspective, but there's a lot of great information in there that can be used in a number of different ways.
Wonderful. Thank you, Heather. So as a follow-up question to Donna's, she was asking, you're specifically looking at the entrepreneurs who've been accepted and then those who have been rejected. And I know this comes up a lot when folks are talking to Gali. Well, is that just selection bias because, they're picking winners, right? And so are you looking at kind of what's fundamentally different between those groups? And are you exploring other ways to benchmark or show that the programs are having an impact separately?
Yeah, I mean, there was actually just an article recently about this and kind of came back with a response. And obviously there is a selection bias inherently involved in this, because the chances that an accelerator program is going to turn down, 5 ventures that they would have otherwise accepted just for the sake of having a more accurate control is not something that I guess we would encourage. We try and account for that for the best of our ability, in the sense that we do sort of track. We track entrepreneurs at 3 stages: 1, where they selected; 2, did they show up for the program; and 3, did they finish the program? So we do have a number of entrepreneurs that were selected but declined their participation, and they actually could provide a more accurate control for something like that. Now, it's not a perfect system, but because we're still doing the analysis year on year, they still have to outperform the prior year. And I think one of the things that's challenging is, if you're looking strictly at investment, if they got a big round of investment the year that they applied for the program, they may not need another round in the following year. So their investment numbers may drop. They may pick up again the next year. So that's why the longitudinal sort of data collection is important. And, we have to be careful about the conclusions that are drawn, 1 year post acceleration, or with 1 year of data. So that's not a perfect answer, and it comes up all the time. But we do the best that we can in terms of accounting for that.
And as part of that, there aren't enough folks who do get accepted and decline to be statistically significant. Is that part of the issue?
At this stage, yes.
Okay, great.
And it also depends. That's self-reported by the accelerator programs. So in the ideal scenario is that they are reporting everyone that they chose, but we don't have that necessarily, because that's not controlled by us. We don't have the ability to verify, okay, did they actually make an offer to that entrepreneur and they were turned down? Are they sort of giving us the next, the ones that they actually selected? But yeah, that's a fair assessment.
And so I think that comes back to an issue that I know many accelerator programs struggle with, which is, how do you actually get the data from the alumni? It's one thing when it's part of the application, but that 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, what are some techniques or tricks that you all have used to help get that information?
I haven't done research on this, so I can't. These are just observations, and I can't say that it's fully the case, but I think the fact that we're a third party that helps with those that were rejected from the program. It eliminates that barrier that maybe, oh, well, they rejected me, so why would I help them out? The big draw is we have financial incentives for entrepreneurs to complete the survey. So we have we give away $20,000 US every 6 months. We do a random drawing of everyone that has completed a survey in those 6 months, and we select 4 entrepreneurs to win $5,000 cash awards. So that is a big draw for entrepreneurs, especially smaller startups that are looking for sort of debt-free, no strings attached capital. And for those that do participate in the program, we work closely with the accelerator partner and talk to them about talking to their entrepreneurs during the program and saying why this is important. I think having that conversation about evaluation and impact measurement during the program with the entrepreneurs to understand why that's important for the accelerator program in the future is important. And I think that helps making that explicitly clear. It's a lot different than if you kind of come out of nowhere and say, hey, how are you doing? We want to know, your revenues from last year. Like having that conversation over the course of the program. Those are the two main things. I've heard a lot of other strategies from partners, including embarrassing them by sending them a cake and saying, hey, you haven't completed your survey. So there's a lot of different strategies out there, but I'd say the financial incentive helps us the most.
Heather, how about you?
So we definitely manage expectations during the program, kind of what Brent said around as part of participating in this program, you're going to be asked to fill out these surveys on an annual basis. And that's, part of the participation and, what the data is used for and why it's important. But in addition, when we actually send out the survey, so we'll send a message to our alumni that the survey is coming and reach out to them specifically. And we always have the program managers that have the strongest relationship with that alumni group send it out. So it's not as though one person, nameless person in Village Capital is sending it out. We'll have our ag program manager send it out to our agriculture companies as a way to get more people to actually fill it out.
I think there's a small percentage, I say small because I don't know, but there's a smaller percentage of entrepreneurs out there who do understand the benefits of being part of a broader research initiative, and they want to contribute to a better understanding of the sector. So there are some that fill it out for that reason. But again, financial incentives.
Great. And we have a question here from Lily Yu that is getting into the women-led businesses question in terms of, number one, has Galley conducted any research into the best ways to help women-led businesses grow or to increase the recruitment of women-led businesses in accelerators?
I'd say just even having the gender question in our survey and sort of putting it up front in the reports that we send to partners has been eye-opening for a lot of our accelerator partners to say, oh, wow, I didn't realize that, with all the things going on, I didn't realize that we were only recruiting, 15% of the venture, only 15% of the ventures have women on their founding team. And of those 15%, only 10% have a woman listed first as the founder. So I've had a lot of partners come back to me and say, wow, this year we're really focusing our efforts on increasing the number of women-led ventures in our applicant pool. So that's definitely a concrete thing that I've seen partners do. It's one of the first things that they always mention is like, wow, what's the global benchmark for that? Where are we compared to the global benchmark? And, not only in the applicant pool, but how many they're selecting. In terms of the data and research side, I think there's kind of a limit to where to the extent our initiative can go. And we see ourselves as putting the information out there and making sure it's getting into the hands of the people who can do more with it, whether that's other academics or practitioners or policymakers or organizations that do policy advocacy. So, in the report that we launched last year, looking at ventures in emerging markets, we found, not surprisingly, that women-led ventures report higher levels of revenue or prior revenue and full-time employees, but substantially lower amounts of equity investment. So that's data that can be taken by a policy advocate and say, okay, this is what the data are showing. In country X, what do we have to do to make sure that women have access to investment? Is it an access issue? Is it a cultural issue? Is it a not asking issue? There's a lot of different factors that come into it, and we sort of just put the data out there and hope that those who are more in touch with the issues can take it from there. So I hope that kind of answers that question.
And to piggyback off that, so Village Capital, we did, I think this is it's an older study that we did, like 2015, 2016. It's in the Stanford Social Innovation Review. I can send it to Avery if she wants to send it around, which looked at the data from EDP that they were collecting and evaluated the performance of the female founders in our programs, and some of the findings that Brent kind of alluded to around, what we found is the companies that came in, the female founded companies that came in with higher revenue weren't able to raise as much investment capital compared to their male counterparts. That sort of those sort of stats that we see over and over again. One of the other interesting things that we found is that once a female-founded company receives initial investment, and now granted this is a smaller sample size, but once a company receives an initial investment, it all but closes the gap between raising future capital, which is really interesting and just going to show the need for early stage capital for female founders to close that funding gap later down the line. We are also in the process of conducting another analysis that looks a lot more deeply, and now we have a much larger data set because it's been a couple years to evaluate the performance of the female founded companies that come through our program, and what aspects of their program are more effective and what aspects of our recruitment are more effective. So if you are interested, I'm not sure who asked that question, I'd love to follow up with you offline about that.
I also can share a little bit from what we've heard from other program partners as well. If you are running a cohort that is meeting in person, for example, the days and times that you're asking them to meet can have a real impact on as to women think that they can be available, especially if they're mothers. And so, nothing replaces just actually asking your cohort what is going to be a really effective time or day to connect. There's also others who have started to provide childcare. That can be a real limiting factor if a woman is not able to pay for or secure childcare. They may either not even apply to a program because they know that that's going to be a factor, or if they get accepted, they may decline because they don't know how they're going to make the time or make it work. And so while I think there is a lot to be said for what Brent is talking about in terms of the power of numbers and kind of counting how many women there's also, I think, real structural concerns. One thing I've heard from others is if you have the more women mentors or investors that you show are associated with the program, the more women will apply because they see mentors that they want to connect with who've maybe shared their experiences. And so these are some of the tactics that could help you as you're thinking about that attraction phase that Lily asked to that. Great. And so I wanted to, let's see here. Heather, going back to you, you had mentioned that there's a number of kind of surprising insights that had come, especially from that deeper dive into the VILCAP data. I was curious if you could also share really tactically, what are some of the programmatic decisions that have arisen from that? How have you really changed your program over the last few years?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, absolutely. So some of the things I had mentioned during the initial discussion, I think one of the biggest things is really taking to heart the idea of the flipped classroom model. So we have kind of like a mantra that we're a guide on the side, not sage on the stage. So we're not in front, teaching concepts. Rather, we are facilitating discussions among the companies among each other and or the companies with mentors on particular topics. So it's all real work, and it's all about building relationships and building networks, which is one of the most important things that accelerators can do, versus shoving in a ton of content that might not be used or incorporated into the business. In addition, thinking really critically about the mentors that we're bringing in and how we're engaging partners. So that finding that it's not the big name, but it's how the partner is involved also, lends itself to mentors as well. So if you're going to have a mentor there, that could be like the managing director of a large fund. It sounds great, but if that person's not actually going to take the time to get to know the business, isn't the one that is actually going to want to take that relationship further, which may be an associate level individual in the firm might be more interested in doing, someone responsible for lead gen, and the initial due diligence, that could be like a better person that you bring into the program to meet the companies. So as part of that, not only thinking about, critically about who from each company or who from each organization we're inviting to participate and mentor, but then we also do surveys from our entrepreneurs to actually evaluate the mentor. So they'll tell us which ones are more effective, which is really helpful for future programs when we are thinking about who to invite back to participate and support the entrepreneurs. And then the other one is around, some of the differences were around differences between software versus hardware companies. So we've kind of thought through aspects of our program when it's focused on a software versus a hardware company. And then
what were some of those differences that you saw arose between software versus hardware?
So some of them, and perhaps this isn't so surprising, but, hardware companies can be more capital intensive. So focusing on that aspect versus early revenue, which a software company might see much earlier in the process of their company. And then, around the selection process. So our entire recruitment process, thinking a lot more about quality over quantity, which really has changed the way that we recruit companies and think about building our pipeline.
And are you also seeing that software hardware difference as well between product versus service?
Yes. Yeah.
Great.
I was going to say, talking about that recruitment aspect, that's where we've seen a lot of partners kind of take the application data we've collected to heart. One of the interesting things that we ask is, what are the benefits? We ask the entrepreneurs, what benefits are you most expecting to get from this program? And we have 7 sort of commonly held benefits of an accelerator program, and ask them to rank in order of priority what's most important for them. And so I really encourage our accelerator partners to look at those results in the application report and say, hey, are the entrepreneurs that are applying to your program really interested in what you match? Do those things match up with what your program offers? So if the most important thing to your applicant pool was direct access to investors, but that's not a component of your program, then perhaps there's a disconnect in your communication, in your marketing to to entrepreneurs during the application phase. So, what changes need to be made? If those are the entrepreneurs that you want to reach, then maybe, you need to start offering different components to your program. Just making sure that what entrepreneurs are looking to get from your program matches up with what your program actually offers in your marketing and communication. So a lot have changed up marketing strategies or said, okay, we got too many early stage ventures. We're looking for a little bit more growth stage. Maybe we weren't explicit in our messaging, so we need to do a better job next time. So that's another area, not necessarily programmatic, but on that selection and marketing side.
Yeah, that seems to have been a trend when we were in Thailand at the Andy presentation there about some of the results from the most recent report. It sounds like being more specific about who this program is for and what they will get out of it, and actually getting to that point of fewer applications but higher quality ones is a really important shift for the field. And so with that, I think that, are there any other questions from the group? No? Great. Well, I want to say thank you all so much for your time. Thank you to Brent. Thank you to Heather for sharing your insights with us. Please stay tuned to the Frontier Incubators website and social media accounts. While applications do close in a little more than 24 hours, we will be doing more webinars on topics. And so similar, if you have a topic that you'd like to see us cover, please don't hesitate to email us at hello@frontierincubators.org to share what would be helpful for you. Thank you all for your time, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.